I'm reacting to the cross-examination of Trooper Michael Proctor.
Trooper Proctor, in the summer of 2022, August 17th specifically, you were sitting at your desk, presumably alone at your office, at about 10 p.m. at night, going through my client's personal cell phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, you were sitting there texting with your friends and colleagues at Massachusetts State Police about you going through her personal cell phone. Is that right?
Correct, sir.
And that included Trooper DeChico. Is that right?
DeChico, yes, sir.
Trooper Fanning, Trooper Buchnick, Trooper Moore, and Trooper Kotskowski.
Kakowski.
Tell me that again.
Kakowski.
Kakowski.
Yes, sir.
All right. All the consonants are silent. Fair enough. Trooper Fanning and Trooper Buchnick are your supervisors.
Yes.
And that tells you a great deal about the culture. And the fact that he's willing to send those kind of texts to two of his supervisors tells you he feels comfortable doing it. So just the fact that he would send them in the first place tells you about the culture there. That's a problem. And the fact that nobody pushed back on this guy is disgusting.
And you were bragging to all five of them that you were going through Karen Reed's cell phone about 9:45 at night.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Is that right?
No, I wasn't bragging, sir.
How did you refer to Ms. Reed in that text exchange where you informed them that you were going through her phone?
I used regrettable language. I said going through his retarded client's phone right now.
You were shown a photograph of my colleague, Mr. Unetti, correct?
Yes.
You'd received a photograph. Actually, Your Honor, if I could, I would ask that this document be marked as next in order. Assuming the witness verifies its authenticity.
So go ahead.
Do you recognize this document?
I do, sir.
Same document that you were shown, copy of the same document that you were shown by Mr. Unetti, correct?
Stilali.
I've done that twice. Mr. Lally.
Correct.
All right. Is that a true and accurate reflection of the text messages that you were exchanging with Chris Moore, Jeff Kakowski, John Fanning, Vito DeChico, and Yuri Buchanan?
Yes.
I'd ask that this be marked.
Okay, any objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I'll see you outside down there. Have that, please.
It was read in. It was described. He's authenticated it. Lally introduced it, but, can't go in.
Trooper Proctor, Trooper DeChico had sent you a photograph of my colleague, Mr. Unetti, correct?
Yes.
You see that, gentleman?
I do, sir.
Is that the photograph that you received?
Yes.
Is that what you referred to on direct examination with Mr. Lally about receiving a photograph from Mr. Unetti?
Correct.
And then your response was what?
I hate that man. I truly hate that man.
Actually, your response was, I'm going through his retarded client's phone right now, correct?
Yes, after the picture, sir, yes.
Who's the retarded client?
I was referring to Miss Reed, again, unprofessional language.
I'm asking who you were referring to.
Miss Reed.
You got an explanation. Who was it that you were referring to as retarded?
Miss Reed.
Karen Reed, the woman sitting to my left.
Yes, sir.
The subject of your investigation as a professional, correct?
Yes, sir.
As an unbiased, objective investigator, the person that you were investigating, you referred to your bosses as retarded, correct?
Again, poor language on my part.
Poor language is one way to put it. Completely offensive is another way to put it, right?
Objection.
Completely offensive is putting it mildly.
After you referred to my client as retarded, then you decided to make a comment about Mr. Unetti, her lawyer, correct?
Correct.
And what did you say about Mr. Unetti again?
I hate that man. I truly hate that man.
I hate that man. I truly hate him, correct?
Correct.
You didn't say I dislike him, disagree with him. You said I hate him, correct?
Correct, sir.
That's a visceral response to someone who's just doing a job, correct?
That was smart. It's a visceral response. He's not placing a moral judgment here. And what he is doing is describing that response in a way that shows it's not a logical response. It's not an objective response. And it's showing that this investigator does not have self-control, that he has an emotion and he acts on it. Visceral was a good word.
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently.
Sure. Let me ask it this way. Were you upset or annoyed or pissed off that Karen Reed had gotten representation, legal representation, to represent her?
No, not at all. That's her right.
He just hates her and happens to hate her lawyer.
Well, let me ask you this. In August of 2022, you said you absolutely hate it, correct?
I don't know if I use absolutely. Yeah, I didn't use absolutely, sir.
You used truly, correct?
Truly, yes.
How do you feel about him now? He's sitting right there.
I still don't care for him, no.
Right. I'll let it stand.
That kind of felt like, you know how people are great bullies when they don't actually have to look you in the eye? It felt like one of those kind of moments. And, you know, this guy doesn't back off. I didn't expect him to apologize. And really, I didn't expect him to back off either. He'll sit there believing he's justified in everything he's done. And that's a problem too. Because when you feel justified, there's nothing that's going to move you to change or examine your behavior.
What did you tell your colleagues that you were looking for as you sat at almost 10 p.m. at night on a Wednesday night, August 17th, 2022, looking through Karen Reed's phone?
I didn't tell them I was looking through anything. They knew I was going through Miss Reed's phone. I provided a inappropriate joke as an update. They knew I was going through location data.
The inappropriate joke is an update? Really?
Text messages, Google searches. But like I had mentioned earlier, I had to stop.
Except for Proctor, none of that really professional sounding stuff ended up in your comments to your bosses, did it?
Again, it was a poor joke.
Is that yes or no?
Did not know.
It did not.
No,
As a
sir.
matter of fact, what did you write after you talked about going through the, quote, retarded client's phone?
Objection.
Jackson is repeating this stuff on purpose. When Proctor testified, he spoke low, he mumbled. The only time the volume of his voice went up was when he was saying Karen Reed is guilty. We had compelling evidence. For the rest of it, he's got his voice low. And Lally was glossing over a whole lot. And his text messages aren't being put up on the screen. Now, I did hear Jackson say something about technical problems. So I don't know if that's the reason, but what an unfortunate day to have such technical problems.
No nudes so far.
No nudes so far, correct?
Correct.
And you said that to your bosses.
Yes, sir.
You were looking for naked photographs of Miss Reed on a Wednesday night as you sat in your office at 9:44 p.m., correct?
No, not correct.
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever looked for naked photos of a male suspect that you were investigating?
I don't look for naked photos in anyone's phones.
I can already hear the arguments about this. I can already hear the arguments of people saying, no, he wasn't actually looking for that kind of photo. He was just joking. Well, he did say he hadn't found them yet. And the joke is not funny. And as I already ranted about in my previous video, it shows all kinds of things. I think Jackson should just go for it here.
But you said you were looking for nudes of Miss Reed,
Like I had
correct?
said, Mr. Jackson, it was an inappropriate joke.
Sir, this is a citizen. She's a woman. You were supposed to be objectively investigating. Does your text message to your colleagues at Massachusetts State Police reflect an objective investigation of a citizen?
Objection.
You can get part of that question and ask it again.
Do you believe that your text messages were reflective of an objective investigator?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Do you believe that, Trooper Proctor?
I believe poor jokes have, in unprofessional language, have no bearing on the integrity and the facts and physical evidence of this case.
First of all, he did not answer the question. That wasn't the question. Secondly, he is continuing to minimize, deflect, make excuses for his disgusting behavior. Unprofessional is an understatement. And as I said before, he can't not be biased. He has demonstrated the bias, not just through these texts, not just through his obvious attitude. And to add to that there's obviously a culture within the organization that thinks this is just fine. It's not just that. It's the tunnel vision right from the get-go. There is no way he's not biased. It's an insult to intelligent people that he would sit there and say that it has no bearing. It has all kinds of bearing. And you know what? He knows that. At the beginning of his testimony, Lally went through his qualifications. He is a trained investigator, and they teach you those things. So he knows better. But, everybody else is maybe stupid, or maybe he's had everybody kind of go along with him for so long that that's what he expects. Piece of work.
It's not that they don't have any bearing on the facts and integrity. It's that they have no place in a professional investigation because it shows bias, right?
Objection.
You weren't so much as objectively investigating Karen Reed as objectifying her, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Isn't that right?
She allowed that. And what a good line.
Phrase the question, please.
You weren't so much as objectively investigating her as objectifying her in those moments, correct?
Again, Mr. Jackson, it was a poor choice of words and a joke that I should not have texted out. But from the start of the investigation, we didn't know what we had.
First of all, his response, instead of answering the question, but the way he phrases his response, well, Mr. Jackson, the way he's talking to him, it is a bit condescending. And the other thing that he's doing within his answer is he is minimizing, making an excuse, deflecting. Think about everything you know about DV, let's say, or abusive personalities in general, or perpetrators in general who don't want to be caught, right? What do? Deny, minimize, deflect, blame.
Trooper Proctor, your point in saying no nudes so far to your colleagues in Massachusetts State Police was to suggest that you were looking for nudes and you'd update them when you found them, correct?
Incorrect.
Well, let me ask you a question. Did you find any nudes of
Again,
Karen Reed?
I didn't go through the photos, sir.
Did you find any nudes of Karen Reed?
I didn't go through the photos, sir.
You weren't successful in your quest.
I came across text messages from Miss Reed to another attorney on January 29th, so I had to stop looking through her phone.
So you got sidetracked before you could get to the naked pictures of Miss Reed. Is that what you're saying?
I'm just curious, how often is he alone working in the office? How often does that happen? Is that a routine thing? I know I used to be alone in the office a lot. Don't know for this particular office how often these guys or one guy would be alone there.
To be clear, when you sent those text messages on that group chat, those text messages included, as we said, or as you said, not one but two of your supervisors, correct?
Correct.
Were you ever reprimanded for your conduct in sending that text message?
Objection.
So that's sustained. Do we need to go to sidebar based on what you told me earlier?
We do not.
Okay, so.
I'll ask it a different way.
Okay.
Did either Trooper Fanning or Trooper Buchanan dress you down in a responsive text message in that text thread for doing something so abhorrent as looking for nudes or referring to nudes of a female suspect or subject of your investigation? Did that ever happen?
Not that I can recall.
As a matter of fact, in reference to one of the text messages in this same string, your boss, Yuri Buchanan, actually responded to the photo of Mr. Yannetti, didn't he?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
He did, sir.
After you received the photo, that's when you said, I'm, quote, funny, I'm going through his retarded client's phone. Is that right?
Objection.
I'll allow this, but not too many more.
Sure. Is that correct? It's on the top of page
Yes, sir.
685.
That's correct.
And Yuri Buchanan liked that comment. Funny, I'm going through his retarded client's phone. Didn't it?
I see you laughed at an image here, sir. I can't tell if he liked that comment, sir.
May I approach?
Yes.
I don't know if it's just because it's faded or... Yeah, my copy's faded.
Top 2685. You can use my copy if that helps.
All right. Thank you.
What do you see on the top of that page?
Sergeant Mechanic liked it.
Like what?
Going through his retarded client's phone, sir.
So your supervisors at Massachusetts State Police not only didn't ride you for making comments like this, he encouraged it.
Objection.
Sustained.
Trooper Proctor, this is your direct chain of command. Is that right? You're a Buchanan?
Yes, sir.
Did you believe that your conduct was a misuse of your authority and power as you were going through her phone in August of 2022?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No, I had a warrant signed by a district clerk, Stoughton District Clerk, to go through Miss Reed's phone.
Did the warrant include that he could look for nudes? Crikey.
I don't think it was an abuse of power. I had every right to go through that phone.
Did the warrant say anything about looking for nudes of my client?
Objection.
Did it
No,
say anything about that?
Your Honor.
Okay, next question.
So that would be an abuse of the power that was given to you by the court, correct?
Objection.
Trooper Proctor,
Look at him. He is not bothered by this. I bet you he goes out drinking with the guys after all this and they talk about it. Yeah, when he said this, what a flippin' idiot, right? Can you hear it? Can you hear them talking? Yeah, and the judge sustained the prosecution's objections. Oh, and he tried to make it sound this way. And who the crap cares? I can hear the conversation.
you'd agree that the hallmark of any good investigation, as you've been taught and others in Massachusetts State Police have been taught, is that the investigation and the investigator have to be fair. They have to be impartial. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Meaning that the investigation has to be free of conflicts, right?
Yes, sir.
The investigator has to be free of conflicts, right?
Yes.
The investigation has to be free of bias. Is that right?
Correct.
You can't be biased against the person that you're investigating. That would compromise the entire thing, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Basically, you follow the evidence. You're supposed to follow the evidence wherever it takes you, right?
Correct.
Good or bad, top to bottom, just follow the evidence and report it back. That's how an investigation is supposed to be run, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And these are things that you learn early on at Massachusetts State Police Academy and then in your detective training. Isn't that right?
It is.
Literally, it's part of an oath that you took at the academy that you will, quote, faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all of the duties incumbent on you as a Massachusetts State Police trooper, right?
Yes, sir.
You swore that oath.
I did.
And I want to mention, taking those oaths, whether it's in this jurisdiction or others, I mean, that's a moment of pride. That oath means something.
When you start an investigation, everybody in that investigation should be treated exactly the same. Don't you believe that's true?
Correct.
Everybody, have you ever heard the phrase, everybody's a suspect?
Everybody should be treated the same. He agrees with that. So does that mean that he will treat everybody like he's treating Karen Reed? All of the cases that he's got ongoing or that are going through court are all going to get looked at.
Until they're not. Right?
Objection.
It's especially important early in an investigation, before all of the facts are known, that the investigator is not compromised by bias, prejudice, right?
Correct.
Most important early in the investigation, because that's when the most things are up in the air. There's the cloud, the fog of not knowing exactly what the truth is, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
In other words, Trooper Proctor, you don't get to pick a suspect and then try to find evidence to support your choice, right?
Correct.
Notice how he paused there before answering? Like, guy, do you have to actually think about that?
But in this case, it's exactly what you did, isn't it?
Absolutely not.
So that was June 10th. We're continuing into day 23 of the trial. The cross continues.
Jackson.
Your Honor, as a matter of housekeeping, I would move to omit the packet of text messages with date stamps inclusive of 02680, 02685 that was referred to on Monday.
Is there an objection to the written one coming in?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Why don't I see you at sidebar on this?
Can you take a look at the face page of what's under tab 2 and tell me if you recognize that?
Yes, sir. It's the private text thread with high school friends.
And this includes 9 participants, 9 chat participants that you engaged with?
That's correct.
Those participants include people by the name of Bird, Whitey, and Doc, correct?
Correct.
And then there's some other folks in there. They're identified by at least the last 4 digits of their phone number, correct?
Yes.
So this is a group text or a group chat with you and 8 of your high school friends about this investigation, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you never thought when you were engaged with these other 8 individuals that this particular set of chats would ever become public, did you?
No, I did not.
I want to take a look at page 2527, if you could turn, that's on the bottom right of the document in tab 2. Do you have that page in front of you?
Yes, sir.
You recognize that this group chat was taking place on January 29th at about 10:52 p.m., correct?
Correct.
And the person that I'll identify as 5051, that's the last 4 digits of that phone number, indicates Chip, name of that BPD cop, correct?
Correct.
First of all, you indicated on Monday that you're Chip, is that right?
Yes, sir.
You responded at 10:53 p.m., John O'Keefe, is that right?
Yes, sir.
So you were willing to tell, just a few hours into an investigation of the death of a Boston police officer, you were willing to tell a bunch of high school buddies details about the investigation, including the name of the victim, correct?
At this point, it's 16 hours later, sir. Not a few.
16 is a few hours, correct? I'm not talking about days later.
It was about 16 hours later, sir.
Correct. And you identified John O'Keefe as the Boston police officer who was fallen in the yard at 34 Fairview, correct?
Correct.
He may have just been caught in perjury here because he texted his sister. And when he was asked about those texts with his sister on the stand, the texts that are from January 29th, he said, well, it had been on the news or it was big news or something along those lines, suggesting that perhaps this was public. And that's why I was asking, when did the news reports come out about this incident? And by the sounds of this, it hadn't come out yet.
Inform these same folks, these same high school buddies that, quote, all the powers that be want answers ASAP, correct?
Yes.
You knew, Trooper Proctor, that there was brass that wanted this case wrapped up quickly and efficient. Isn't that right?
Objection.
Oh, well, is that what you were thinking?
No, the people wanted answers, sir.
They didn't just want answers. They wanted answers ASAP. What does ASAP mean?
That's as soon as possible.
Right. And you were texting this to your high school friends, again, 16 hours into this investigation, right?
Correct.
And you knew at that time, Trooper Proctor, that this was not going to implicate in any way, shape, form, or fashion another cop, correct?
Correct.
In this text,
I can't believe that he just admitted that. He knows on January 29th, before there's a complete investigation, he knows it's not going to implicate another cop. I can't believe he just said, yep, that's right.
in this text exchange at 10:56 p.m., your buddy Bird writes, I'm sure the owners of the house will receive some shit, correct?
Correct.
How did you take that to mean? Did you take that to mean that he could get in trouble?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what my friend was getting at.
Well, you had some idea.
Yeah, maybe.
The owners of the house isn't going to get any shit for this, right?
That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, you interpreted it like he's not going to get in any trouble. He's not going to be a suspect, correct?
Correct.
And he's not going to be implicated in any way. Is that right?
Correct.
And your answer,
By this point, there was still a lot of red flags, a lot of evidence that pointed to the people within that house. But he's already made up his mind that, that's not going to happen. He's done right here. He'd be done, or he should be done, even if she was guilty.
was one word, correct?
Yes.
What was that word?
Nope.
And then you followed that up with an explanation as to why you said no, didn't you?
That wasn't the explanation why I said nope. I simply said homeowner's a Boston cop too, meaning Mr. O'Keefe was a Boston cop. The homeowner was a Boston cop as well.
The question that preceded your answer, nope, the homeowner's a Boston cop too, was the homeowner's going to get some shit for this, correct?
That's not what I meant with that text.
That's what you wrote.
Not what I meant, sir.
All right, let's take it in order. Question. Oh goodness, the homeowner's going to get some shit for this. Answer, nope. Next text, he's a Boston cop too. That doesn't sound like an explanation for your nope.
No, that's just saying he's a Boston cop as well. Mr. O'Keefe is a
And that's
Boston
why
cop.
he's not going to get any shit. Correct, Trooper Proctor?
Well, he's not going to receive any shit, sir, because Mr. Albert, the homeowner, had nothing to do with Mr. O'Keefe's death.
And you
Wow. He cannot say that. That could not be his reasoning unless he had already made up his mind, unless he was biased, because the evidence does not match what he could have been thinking at that time if he's claiming that he was thinking that Brian Albert had nothing to do with anything. He's just demonstrating his bias right here in front of the jury. Mind you, I don't know what the heck you say to get out of that one. And I wish they would stop panning to read. I want to look at the witness. I want to see every little expression. I want to see his body language.
knew this 16 hours into your investigation.
Yes.
Less than a day.
Yes.
To your satisfaction.
To my satisfaction and
you
to the
hadn't
members
been
of my
to the
unit.
crime scene?
So let him finish. We didn't get the, finish your answer?
To my satisfaction and to all the members of my unit who investigated that day.
Objection. Calls for speculation.
So I'm going to let it stand. Trooper Proctor, you have to keep your voice up, okay?
And all the other ones in his unit, the same ones that are fine with the kind of texts he was sending, same ones that are also biased in the same way he is. Yeah, okay.
Jurors need to hear you way back there.
Yes, ma'am.
The fact of the matter is, you hadn't been to the crime scene by the time you wrote this text, correct?
Correct.
You hadn't been inside the home, correct?
No.
You had you had questioned a grand total of 3 percipient witnesses at this point, correct?
Yes.
And 2 of the 3 were named McCabe, right?
Correct.
And 1 of the 3 was named Albert, correct?
Yes.
And it's against that backdrop that you wrote, nope, the homeowner's not going to get any shit because he's a cop, right?
That's not what I meant by that.
At 10:57, Bird goes on to write, he, the homeowner, must have been a puddle to accomplish that. And then he writes, who's the homeowner? And then he writes, I hope not, but I can see it. Correct?
Yes.
A puddle means drunk, correct?
That's a term for it, yes.
In other words, Bird wrote that the homeowner must have been so drunk, so wasted to have killed him. Correct?
Objection.
Do you know what that means? Do you know what that text means?
Just the puddle part, Your Honor. That term.
All right, so he can answer.
Did you just see that? When Jackson finished his question, it took a second for it to either register or for the reaction to happen. But his face just went change color. He knows something. He knows something, and he's scared to death that Jackson is onto him. Up until now, he's been a little bit almost cocky. He knows better than to be really blatant about it. But he's looking like, a teenager who's in trouble and doesn't care that he's in trouble. But, whoa, big reaction there.
And the puddle part means drunk or wasted, right?
Yes.
And what Bird actually wrote was, he must have been a puddle to accomplish that. Correct?
That's what he wrote.
And then you write back, quote, she waffled him. I looked at his body at the hospital, right?
Correct.
You used the phrase waffled about a Boston police officer who had fallen in the snow and died in someone's yard. And you decided to use the word waffled him, correct?
Objection.
So sustained. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Did you answer, she waffled him, I looked at his body at the hospital?
I did answer that, yes.
And then Bird questioned, she waffled him, correct?
Yes.
And then you responded, he was banged up. Is that right?
Yes.
Then a person with the phone number 0095 wrote, I thought he was drunk. Did he get beat up? You see that?
I do.
And you wrote, nope. Is that right?
Correct.
Yet again, this is before 11 o'clock at night on January 29th, 2022, some 16 hours into your investigation. Is that right?
Yes.
So before you ever went to the crime scene, before you ever went into the house, only having interviewed 3 folks, you had this case nice and wrapped up, didn't you?
Yes. Based on the evidence,
It's a yes or no. It's a yes or no. And the answer is yes, he did.
my office uncovered that day the one shoe discovered at the scene, the one shoe at the hospital, Mr. O'Keefe's injuries, the broken taillight pieces underneath the snow.
Super Proctor, I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked, did you, in your mind, have this case wrapped up? Was it cut and dry in your mind?
Yes.
Bird then writes, so the owner of the house was a woman. Sorry, was a woman cop that beat him? Question mark. Right?
Yes.
And then you wrote, that's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you said, then I saw the guy. Correct?
Correct.
So what you meant by that, Trooper Proctor, was according to you, based on your conversations, your initial conversations with the paramedics, the first responders, you were under the impression that this was a beating death. He'd been beaten to death, correct?
The way it was given to me, sir, was
That's yes
a
or no?
medical.
That's yes
No,
or no?
he's going to answer the question. If you want
Go
to
ahead.
withdraw the question, you can.
No, go ahead.
We entered this investigation with an open mind. It was given to me as a medical situation. And when we saw Mr. O'Keefe's body at the hospital, Sergeant Buchanan and I, we saw his injuries and we were kind of working through how these injuries occurred.
As a matter of fact, both you and Sergeant Buchanan believed that he had suffered the injuries as a result of a physical altercation based on information you received from the paramedics initially, correct?
Initially, we didn't know what we had. We knew there was some significant injuries to Mr. O'Keefe. And we're still figuring out how those injuries occurred.
Well, you just testified. Initially, we didn't know what we had.
Right.
But 16 hours after the fact, you wrote the following sentence. That's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics. Correct?
Correct.
So initially, you did think you knew what you had. A physical altercation leading to a death. Correct?
Correct.
So when you just said, initially we didn't know what we had, that wasn't quite true. You did at least have an idea of what you thought you had, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
All right. You were aware initially that John O'Keefe had suffered a 2-inch laceration to the back of his head, correct?
Yes.
That resulted in a skull fracture, correct?
Correct.
He had a laceration over his right eye, small laceration just under the eyebrow, correct?
Yes.
Had a laceration on his nose. Is that right?
Correct.
He had patterned scratches on his right arm, abrasions, scratches, correct?
Yes.
And he had no injuries below the neck.
Not that I observed, sir.
Not a single broken bone, correct?
Not that I was aware of.
Not a single fracture, correct?
Not that I was aware of.
Not a single bruise below the neck, right?
Not that I observed.
Looks a lot like a physical altercation, doesn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
You know, as Jackson goes through this, he didn't have broken bones. I'm thinking, well, you know, these troopers couldn't know whether he had broken bones or not at that point. But I think that's part of a point, which is he's saying, not that I was aware of, not that I was aware of, not that I observed. He didn't know. He didn't have all of the information, yet he had his mind made up.
Bird writes, Bear, let's focus, correct?
Yes.
Who's Bear?
That's another nickname I have.
0095 writes, what does she waffled him mean? And then Bird writes, what's the story, correct?
Correct.
And you wrote, she hit him with her car. Is that right?
Yes.
Have you ever seen, in your experience, have you ever seen a pedestrian who's hit by a 6,000-pound car with no bruises? Ever?
The pedestrian strikes I've seen have been at high speeds,
And that's
60
enough
plus.
for a person out of the shoe, right?
60 plus miles per hour. So I can't recall right now off the top of my head as far as injuries in the past pedestrian strikes I've attended.
Okay. So
What an easy out, huh? One of the things that bothers me about these texts is that somebody says to him, focus. Why? He's dead now, right? He saw him. He doesn't need to focus. He needs to relax. Why does he need to focus? Focus on what? That sounds a lot to me like, hey, focus. You better get this sorted out in your head. You better figure out what the story is.
someone, you indicated on Monday, under examination by Mr. Lally, you've seen a shoe missing,
Correct.
pedestrian strikes, correct?
Yes.
Those are high speed, extremely high speed incidents, correct?
Yes.
60 plus miles an hour, right?
I can't recall all the pedestrian strikes I've been to as far as the miles per hour the vehicle is traveling.
He's only been to like 6. Anyway, according to his own testimony. It's not like he's been to 1,000 of them.
Let me ask you the question again. Have you ever, yes or no, have you ever, in your experience, seen a vehicle, pedestrian incident, in which the pedestrian has no bruises?
Objection.
After you wrote, she hit him with her car, 5051 writes, oh Jesus, and Bird writes, okay, that's fucked up, correct?
Correct.
And then you wrote what?
Intentional or not?
Intentional or not? Is that right?
Yes.
Your words.
Correct.
0095 then chimes in, gotcha. He was frozen in the driveway and she didn't see him? Question mark. Correct?
Correct.
And you wrote what?
That's another animal we won't be able to prove.
That's another animal we won't be able to prove. Correct?
Correct.
Trooper Proctor, you knew that there were going to be things in this case, even 16 hours into this, that you just admitted you would have zero proof of. Correct?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently.
Did you mean by that statement that this was one of several things that you knew we would not be able to prove?
That statement, that's another animal we won't be able to prove, references the intentional or not part.
You didn't care at that point when you wrote that, you didn't care what you could or could not prove, did you?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Isn't that what you meant?
No.
You had a narrative that you had developed and you would pursue it no matter what the proof was. That's what you meant by that statement, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently.
Did you mean by that, thank you, Your Honor, I didn't mean to step on your words. Did you mean by that statement that you were going to pursue this case no matter what the proof might be?
What I meant by that statement was if Miss Reed backed into Mr. O'Keefe intentionally or not.
And he didn't finish this sentence, which is basically we wouldn't be able to prove that part.
Heels of he was frozen in the driveway and she didn't see him. And you wrote in response to that question, that's another animal we won't be able to prove. Correct?
That's not what I was responding to. I was responding to the intentional or not part.
So you're responding to your own statement.
Correct.
Okay. 0095 then writes, what's the name of the Canton cop living in Canton? The other one involved. Correct?
Yes.
In other words, that person was asking, tell me the name of the homeowner. Isn't that right?
Yes.
The guy that's the cop, right?
Correct.
And you ignored that question for a second time. Is that right?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, not one time, not once in this entire group chat did you disclose the name Brian Albert, did you?
I don't believe so, no.
You were actively trying to hide Brian Albert's name, at least from this conversation.
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that what you were trying to do?
Absolutely not.
But you had no problem sharing John.
That's what you call a trapdoor question. Because if he says, absolutely not, I wasn't trying to hide it, well, it suggests he's willing to disclose this information that he shouldn't be disclosing. And if he says, oh yeah, I was trying to hide it, maybe I was trying to protect their privacy or something, well then, so why did you disclose this other information? That was one of those questions. It doesn't matter what the witness says. He wasn't going to win that one.
O'Keefe's name with your buddies from high school, right?
Correct.
And you had no problem sharing Karen Reed's name with your buddies from high school, correct?
I don't believe I named the defendant.
Not yet, you didn't. Later in the chat.
Okay, correct.
5051 then writes, the BPD have any jurisdiction here because it was their own? Question mark. Is that right?
Yes.
And a few texts later, if you look down a few texts, at about 11 o'clock, you see a text that starts, nah, cat.
I do, sir, yes.
You responded, quote, nah, N-A-H, nah, cat, K-A-T-T. It's the total opposite. They have to recuse themselves. Same with Canton. Correct?
That text ends as they have to recuse themselves.
How did you end that text?
Same with Canton.
Meaning Canton has to recuse itself also, correct?
That was my understanding.
So by 11 p.m. on January 29th, 2022, there was no question in your mind, Trooper Proctor, that the Canton Police Department was recused from this investigation in all particulars, correct?
That they had taken a step back from participating, yes.
Right. Well,
All right. He's contradicting his own testimony on direct right here. It started with they had to take a step back. That's the language he wants to use. Look at the look on his face. That's the language he wants to use. But then it comes out eventually, and I don't know that Lally did this on purpose, but it came out on direct that the state police had complete carriage of this investigation, that it was solely on them, that it was more than just taking a step back or not doing interviews. It was much more than that. So that did come out. It's good that Jackson is bringing this up again. Lally's glossing over things, right? So it would be really easy to miss a detail or misunderstand or not be clear. So it's good that Jackson is going after it. And it also provides opportunity to impeach the witness, because he pretty much indicated on the stand yesterday something contrary to the impression he's trying to give now. And you notice how thirsty he is?
there's one way to put it. They've taken a step back from participating. Another way to put it is they recused themselves completely, correct?
Correct.
They were not going to be, at least in your mind, they were not to be involved in any way, just like Boston PD was not to be involved in any way. Is that right?
Objection.
Is that what you were thinking?
It was my understanding they were not going to be involved.
Page 2537, 5051 writes, but I assume you guys are out to make it cut and dry since it involves cops, correct?
Yes.
And Bird writes, something stinks, correct?
Correct.
And then Trooper Proctor, you responded, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl. Isn't that right?
That's right.
So in that text exchange, you were saying, yeah, we're out to make it cut and dry.
Holy crap. And even those guys know something stinks.
Correct?
No.
You didn't write, yeah, we're going to follow the evidence wherever it takes us. You didn't, did you?
I did not write that.
You didn't write, yeah, we're going to make sure that we investigate this thing fully and thoroughly before making any decisions. You didn't say that, did you?
I did not.
You wrote, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And the reason you wrote that is because you knew, as the text above it says, this has to be cut and dry because it involves cops, right?
Objection.
I'm going to allow that. Is that the reason you wrote it?
No, Your Honor.
And then you indicated, we're going to put serious charges on the girl. Who did you mean by the girl, by the way?
The defendant.
Karen Reed?
Yes, sir.
That was a good one. What he's doing is saying, hey, you're still making her an object. She's a tool to you now, right? And she has a name.
So the way that you were going to make it cut and dry, pretty simple. Just pin it on the girl, right?
Objection.
Is that right?
Absolutely not. Follow the facts and the evidence from that day on the 29th, and everything led to Miss Reed hitting Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle.
But that wasn't the
He knows what he's supposed to say, but it's actually a lie. It's provable that he's lying. He did anything but follow the facts and the evidence. And he went way out of his way to make sure that a whole lot of other evidence either disappeared because he acted directly on it or that somebody else could act upon it. He went out of his way to not do things, to not investigate. He had to work hard to close his eyes. A ninth grade law student could have figured this out, that there was something wrong here, that they should have secured a scene, that they should have looked in the house.
question that you were answering, was it? We're going to follow the evidence and make sure we do this thoroughly. The question you were answering was, I assume you guys, you, Trooper Proctor, and your team are going to, quote, make it cut and dry, since it involved cops, meaning Brian Albert, correct?
Incorrect. Doesn't matter to me if the homeowner's a cop, if the victim's a police officer. Myself and everyone in my office investigated this case that Saturday, had an overwhelming amount of evidence that Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe. So it didn't matter to us what their occupation was.
If the evidence was so overwhelming, why do they need to keep going back? Why did they have to have 2 conference calls with the ME to try and pressure her into making a determination that, in her professional opinion, she wasn't prepared to make? Why is that?
We'll see. Let's keep reading, shall we? 5051, a little further down, says, gotta be, I could only imagine what internal affairs at BPD are trying to get out there. Correct?
Correct.
Meaning, this person, 5051, was opining, at least in your mind, you interpreted that as being Boston police are going to have a lot to answer for, given the fact that another Boston police officer was found dead on that officer's lawn. Correct?
Objection.
What were you thinking?
Can't speak to the mindset to that comment. I wasn't sure how to interpret that one.
All right, next question, Mr. Jackson.
Then 5051 changes gears and he writes, she hot at least, correct?
Yes.
And what was your response to that?
From all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job cunt.
From all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job cunt. That's what you wrote, correct?
Correct.
16 hours into this investigation.
Yes.
Into your objective and unbiased, thorough investigation, correct?
Correct.
But sir, you didn't have all accounts, did you?
What I meant by that was
Did you or did you not have all accounts in your investigation?
the accounts we had was Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle, discovered taillight pieces at
The accounts were that she struck him? Oh, really? So there's an eyewitness who saw this? Who saw it happen? Come on. The accounts? They had accounts of something from his friends. Give me a break. He just wants to keep repeating. We found the taillight pieces. You know what? Through this trial, one of the things that has been proven is that Reed did have a damaged taillight. That's been proven. There's no doubt about that. How it got damaged, though, is another story. And the extent to which it was damaged prior to these yahoos getting their hands on it is something different too. He just wants to repeat the buzzwords, compelling evidence. Look at all these taillight pieces. Except don't actually look at the evidence bags. Don't look too closely because there are anomalies there if you look close. On the day that Lally introduced a whole pile of them, they just kind of flew by one by one without a whole lot of discussion about any of it. It looks good. Looks like something you might see on CSI.
At the scene, those are the accounts we had.
The accounts
And then
you
some.
had, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The accounts you had, Trooper Proctor, were from two people named McCabe and one named Albert, who happened to be the homeowner and a Boston cop. Those are the accounts from percipient witnesses that you had, correct?
There was another additional witness that we had, investigators had interviewed, Miss Roberts as well.
And from all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. That was your decision 16 hours into the investigation, correct?
Yes.
And the other decision that you made and the other determination you came to was my client, Karen Reed, was a whack job cunt.
By the way, Carrie Roberts wasn't at Fairview or the Waterfall, so she can't speak to whether or not O'Keefe went inside the house. She can speak to other things, certainly. She's certainly a witness, but she can't speak to whether or not Brian Albert did anything wrong. She has no idea.
Yes.
What else did you say in response to, she's hot at least? Or she hot at least, question mark.
So following that text, I responded, yeah, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass.
Yeah, she's a babe. Who's the she?
Miss Reed.
Weird Fall River accent, though. You talking about her, the way she talks?
The accent.
And no ass. Now you're talking about her body, her physique, correct?
Yes.
You think that's appropriate?
Absolutely not.
Then Bird chimes in with a little comedy. Ah, not newsworthy then, correct?
Correct.
In other words, well, she didn't have an ass. Nothing to see here, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
And then 5051 says, oh, she's skating, right?
Correct.
And what did you write after that?
My response was 0 chance she skated.
And then what did you write?
She's fucked.
0 chance she skates. She's fucked, right?
Correct.
You decided on the 29th of January, 17 hours into this investigation, you decided individually, Trooper Proctor, you're not only going to put it on the girl, you decided you're going to make sure this is cut and dried, and the way you're going to do it is to make sure that she's fucked. That's what you were saying.
Objection.
All right, so that's sustained. You can, the content's fine. You have to ask it differently.
17 hours into this investigation, Trooper Proctor, you made the decision that you were going to put it on Miss Reed, didn't you? Put the case on Miss Reed. She was going to catch the case, correct?
No, absolutely not.
What did you mean then when you said she's fucked?
After the day's investigation with multiple troopers conducting multiple tasks and a debriefing at Canton PD amongst detectives in my office who went through the overwhelming amount of evidence against Miss Reed that she struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle. That's what I meant by that comment.
What you meant by that comment, Trooper Proctor, was you were going to make sure because 5051 had said she's going to skate. She's skating. When you said 0 chance she skates, she's fucked. What you meant was, I'm going to make sure, I am going to make sure Ms. Reed doesn't skate. She's fucked. That's what you meant, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
And then Bird decides to chime in. Good. No ass bitch. Right?
Yes, that's what he wrote.
And how did you respond to Bird saying, good, no ass bitch?
I laughed.
Thought that was funny, did you?
I guess if you're not attractive enough, not desirable enough, you're a B and you're disposable. Good to know with these guys, eh? It's what these guys are about.
Trooper Proctor? Thought that was funny?
It was unprofessional of me. That's something I shouldn't have done.
Well, I think we all know it was unprofessional. It was a lot of things. I'm asking
Yep.
you, did you think it was funny?
No, according to my response at the time, apparently.
Shonda Vander Ark, if that's what the text says.
Then you sent a picture, just to add to it, to pile on, of Miss Reed being arrested, correct?
I'm not sure if that came from me, sir.
Let's skip to 2543. The date is now February 2nd, 2022. A person by the name of Doc writes, "Is that chick a smoke?" Correct?
Correct.
Who's the chick?
Miss Reed.
And you write E-H, right?
Yes.
And then you write nutbag, as Chief would say, correct?
Correct.
Who's Chief?
A friend of mine.
And then you write what?
She's got a leaky balloon knot.
Trooper Proctor, explain to the jurors what a balloon knot is.
Your essentially, I guess, your rectum area.
Your anus?
Yes.
That's what you were referring to about Miss Reed?
Yes.
And you were making fun of her because you believed at that time that it leaked? That's how you were treating Miss Reed? Yes or no?
Yes.
And then you followed that up just to make sure you cleared up any mistake about what you meant with leaks poo, correct?
Objection.
All right, so I'm going to strike that. You could get this in, but do it the right way, Mr. Jackson.
You followed that up with the phrase leaks poo, didn't you?
I did.
Again, another reference to Miss Reed's medical issues and medical conditions, correct?
Correct.
Specifically focused on her anus, correct?
In reference, yes.
Were you aware at the time that you wrote this that Miss Reed had suffered a colectomy surgery, very serious surgery?
I was not, sir, no.
Were you aware that she had had 10 surgeries in 18 months, several years prior? 10.
I was not aware of that.
Were you aware that she had serious medical issues, gastrointestinal medical issues that she suffered with, she was a victim of for years? Did you know that?
Objection.
Sustained.
You decided that you were going to take another shot at her and talk about her anatomy as a balloon knot, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
At this point, Trooper Proctor, Miss Reed was just reduced to a punchline to you, wasn't she?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, you weren't done yet. This chat doesn't end yet, does it?
No, sir.
Let's skip to 2543. On the same date, February 2nd, 2022, about 4:15 p.m., a person by the name of Whitey wrote, "What are you guzzling on?" Correct?
Yes.
And you wrote, "Nothing, writing a warrant." Is that right?
Correct.
Whitey then shares some sort of a video, correct?
Yes.
You remember that video being of the 1980s band Warrant?
I don't recall the video he sent.
0095 laughed and then wrote, "Wait, why does her asshole leak?" Correct?
Yes, that's what he wrote.
And then what did Doc write in response to that?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection sustained. I'll see it. Sidebar, take that down, please.
February 2nd, he's writing a warrant. Wonder what that was for. Because the person from the lab came on February 1st. Have you looked up that banned warrant?
Without getting to the specifics of the words used in the following, in the next exchange that you're looking at, it's fair to say that your high school buddies then continue to discuss Miss Reed's medical issues, correct?
Objection.
That's sustained. Come on, Mr. Jackson. That isn't what you said you'd ask. Go ahead and ask the question you said you'd ask.
Was there a continued discussion that finished on this subject matter?
Yes.
On Monday, you indicated that your conduct in this case, and specifically your conduct as reflected in these messages, how did you put it? It did not affect the integrity of the investigation, of your investigation, correct? That's what you
Correct.
said to the jurors.
Correct.
Do you know what the definition of integrity is?
Doing the right thing when no one's looking.
It's the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you believe that integrity means being honest and having strong moral principles?
I believe that's part of it as well.
Do you stand by that testimony that you were showing strong moral principles in this investigation, sir?
In the investigation part, absolutely. Through these text messages, absolutely not. They were juvenile and regrettable.
When you say they're juvenile and regrettable, it sounds like you're almost apologizing to the jury for your conduct. Is that what you're doing?
For those text,
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Trooper Proctor, have you ever apologized to Miss Reed?
Objection.
Sustained.
That's a good question. I know they're objecting, they're not going to let it in, but this whole thing is bigger than this trial. How do you conduct an investigation with integrity when the people in charge of the investigation have no integrity?
As the lead investigator in this case, you were tasked with the responsibility of making sure that the investigation remained free of any conflicts of interest. That's part of your job, correct?
correct.
Throughout the pendency of this investigation, in this case, you've denied having any conflict of interest in this case. Isn't that right?
Correct.
In fact, a couple of months ago in February of 2024, you testified in a different proceeding. Is that right?
Yes.
And you testified under oath in that proceeding on February 1st that you did not know any members of the Albert family or McCabe family, correct?
Certain members of the Albert family I did not know. I know Chris and Julie and Colin.
That wasn't the question. And this is stupid. He's being asked about previous testimony. He's been on the stand before. He knows the lawyer has that testimony. He's going to get impeached. He's going to have to admit it, that he said that. So just admit it.
Colin. I don't know the McCabes.
That wasn't my question. Did you testify? Let's take them one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Did you testify under oath, same oath you took here today, in a former proceeding in February of 2024, that you did not know and did not have any relationship with members of the Albert and McCabe families? Did you?
I haven't had a chance to review those minutes. I've only had one opportunity to, and that was a couple months ago. So I would want to review those minutes in order to answer that accurately.
You can't remember how you testified, whether or not you knew or had relationships with the Alberts and McCabes?
Objection.
Sustained.
As you sit here right now, you need to refresh your recollection. You can't remember what you said.
Objection.
Do you remember what you said?
During that proceeding, no.
Would it refresh your recollection if you took a look at those grand jury minutes?
Yes.
I think Jackson was doing something else with the you don't remember your testimony, pushing him on
Tell me, I have
that.
just
He was doing something else there.
Would that refresh your recollection about a question and answer that you had, or series of questions and answers that you had while you were testifying under oath in that other proceeding?
Yes, sir.
Objection. May we approach?
Yes.
Quote, did you communicate with First Assistant DA Beeland that you did not know and had no relationship with the Albert and McCabe families? And you answered, quote, to the best of my recollection, the same conversation took place with everyone I talked to about this, because it's the same answer. It's the facts that I shared with everyone.
That's why Jackson kept pushing him and saying, you don't remember? Really? Are you sure you don't remember? This is why.
Question, meaning you told First Assistant Beeland that you didn't know, didn't have a relationships with
Objection, Your Honor.
members of the Albert and McCabe families. Answer, correct.
Yes, that's correct.
So your question is whether he said this?
Correct. Whether that's his testimony. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that's your testimony that you, in fact, told members of the DA's office that you did not know and did not have a relationship with the Alberts or McCabe's. Is that right?
I did not know the McCabes. I don't know most of the Alberts, and I have Little to no relationship with Chris and Julie. So that's what I meant by that answer.
Well, the question wasn't, did you know most of the Alberts? The question was, did you have a relationship with, or did you know the Alberts? And your answer was no.
No, I don't have a relationship with the Alberts.
Or know them.
I don't know the McCabe's. I don't have a relationship with the Alberts.
So you do know
asked-
the Alberts.
You ever try and argue with a teenager who's trying to weasel out of something? That's what this reminds me of.
Correct?
I know some of them, Julie and Chris.
And Colin, correct?
Correct, and Colin.
And you knew the Alberts when you gave this testimony in February of 2024. Is that right?
Yeah, they asked if there was any relationships.
Let's try this again. Meaning you told First Assistant Beeland that you didn't have relationships with members of the Alberts and members of the Albert and McCabe families. Answer, correct.
Mm-hmm.
Was that ambiguous in your mind?
The way I interpreted relationships was basically being like friends or
So he's dancing. He knows he's dancing because the issue is not relationships. It's did you know? No. He's done this before. He's been a little weasel before.
Communications, freaking communications. That's how I interpreted it.
Well, that might have been a good time to pipe up and say, well, I know Chris and I know Julie and I know Colin, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
That might have been a good time to answer the question, I know these three individuals from the Albert family, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
But your answer was one word, correct, right?
Yes.
You further testified that you never have gone to any supervisor at Massachusetts State Police to disclose even a potential conflict of interest in this case that you might have, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated the needs never come up. Is that right?
Correct.
You also told ADA Lally that you, quote, did not have relationships or know members of the Albert or McCabe families, correct?
Correct.
And that's just not true, is it? You do know members of the Albert family. Isn't that right?
It's different from having a relationship with people.
But what about part of the question, did not have relationships or know members of the Albert or McCabe families? How about that part of the question?
Well, that
Listen, kid, go to your room. Just go to your room. No TV, no devices. And you think about what it means to tell the truth and play games with the truth. And when you want to have an actual straight conversation, then you can come out and talk to me. Unbelievable.
that's lumped in with the McCabe's. I don't know the McCabe family, sir.
I see. So what you did, Trooper Proctor, is you dissected the sentence, and where relationships are concerned, you ignored that in terms of the Alberts because you don't have relationships. Where no is concerned, you link that to the McCabe's because you don't know the McCabe's. That's what you did?
No.
Objection.
So it's sustained. You can ask it. You can break it down, Mr. Jackson.
Not sure I can. I'll ask it a different way. How about if I just ask it this way? That was a lie, wasn't it?
No, absolutely not.
You stand by that testimony?
Yes.
That's hilarious. He just told us that when he says absolutely not, he's lying. So go back through his testimony, and every time he says absolutely not, for this guy, he's lying. Some people say absolutely not or absolutely, and they're not lying. There's not a universal blanket thing that you can say about people. But for this guy, absolutely not is a tell. He's lying, and he just told us that.
That you don't know at the time that you testified, that you didn't know the Alberts or any members of the Albert family?
That I don't have relationships with them.
Okay. My question is, you keep going back to relationships. I'm asking you, did you testify that you didn't know them?
Objection.
I'll let him have it. Do you understand the question, Trooper?
I knew Chris, Julie, and Colin.
So if you were to say, I don't know any members of the Albert family, that would have been a lie, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Trooper Proctor, you've indicated that your sister is one of your best friends, maybe your best friend.
Yes.
Courtney Proctor, that's her name? Courtney
Correct.
Proctor. Elberg?
I'm sorry?
Her last name?
Elberg.
Elberg, with an L. And you're aware that she is also very, very good friends with Jillian Daniels, Julie Albert.
Correct.
Are you aware of any circumstance in which any of the Alberts have been over to your parents' house?
Yes.
Have you ever been over at your parents' house when any of the Alberts have been at your parents' house?
Yes.
Those Alberts include Chris Albert, Julie Albert, Colin Albert, correct?
Correct.
As a matter of fact, you were on or around January 29th, 2022, you were close enough friends with Julie Albert that she had your personal cell phone in her cell phone, correct? And vice versa.
I wouldn't classify us as close friends at all.
Okay, let me get back to my question. Did you have her cell phone in your phone, and did she have yours?
I can't recall if I believe I had her stored in my phone. Yes, sir.
Do you recognize the participants in this chat?
I do.
His face just turned right red again.
374, you recognize that as being from Julie Albert?
Based off the content of the message, yeah, I recognize this text message from Julie.
And she texts, "This is the weekend I've been waiting for. Michael, please send ski videos if CP doesn't share with me," with a laughing face, correct?
Correct.
That text was sent on February 24th, 2022, wasn't it?
Yes.
That was less than a month after Mr. O'Keefe's death, isn't that right?
Correct.
And less than a month after you had been assigned to the investigation in which Julie Albert was a witness, correct?
Correct.
And her husband, Chris Albert, was a witness, correct?
Correct.
And her son, you knew, Colin, was involved as well, correct?
Yes.
Who is CP in that text message?
It's a nickname I have for my sister.
Courtney Proctor, correct?
Correct.
Trooper Proctor, on January 19th, 2022, 10 days before Mr. O'Keefe's death, you were texting with your sister about whether Julie Albert might be available to babysit for your own son, correct?
Yes.
So in fact, your relationship with the Alberts was close enough that you would consider leaving your own child in the hands of Julie Albert as a babysitter, as a caregiver for your toddler, correct?
I wouldn't say close enough. I've hired babysitters that I've had out, but I don't know.
He knew her. It doesn't matter that they were very close or just close enough that he could get her to babysit, or that she was very close to his sister, who he's very close to. Obviously, there's a connection. There's a conflict. In addition to making sure you avoid any conflict, you want to make sure that for the sake of the public and public trust, you avoid the appearance of conflict as well. So if you can get somebody else to conduct those interviews or take over this case, and that's what he should have done, then that's what you do. Justice should be done, and it should also be seen to be done, because the public's perception of the justice system and of police matters.
But Julie Albert was among them.
Yes, she was an option to watch my child.
And then you personally interviewed Julie Albert and Chris Albert in this case on February 10th, 2022.
Sergeant Buchanan and I did, yes.
And you didn't mention a thing about your relationship with Julie Albert, Chris Albert, or Colin Albert in any report that you ever drafted in this case, did you?
I did not.
Not one word, correct?
No, sir.
But what about conducting an investigation with integrity? Wouldn't you want to make sure that was disclosed? I have a question for you. I mean, he's dancing around, he's playing with words, and that whole exchange over, well, no, and relationship. And here he's hedging. If you're a juror watching this behavior, never mind what you think about Karen Reed. Let's say this was another case. Let's say he's not a police officer. He's not a police officer. This is just some guy on the stand, and he's being asked questions, and he's behaving like this. What would you think? Would you find him credible? Would you find him reliable and trustworthy?
You interviewed Julie and Chris Albert at about 5:30 p.m. on the 10th of February, isn't that right?
Yes.
Did either of them, Julie or Chris Albert, mention that their son Colin Albert had been at 34 Fairview Road on the night in question, January 29th?
I'd have to reread the report to refresh my memory on their statements.
Do you recall Trooper Proctor ever mentioning that whether or not Julie and Chris mentioned to you that their son had been at 34 Fairview on January 29th? Do you recall that as you sit here?
To the best of my recollection, no.
It was a very short interview with Julie and Chris, was it not?
It was typical length for the information they had to offer.
So you started the interview about 5:30 p.m. It must have been relatively short because you received a phone call by 6:17 from Julie Albert herself, correct?
I don't have the call detail record in front of me, but okay, yes.
You indicated that you might need to look at a phone record or a phone log to determine whether or not that call was made and what time it was made, correct?
If you have that.
You received after your interview, you received a phone call from Julie Albert about 6:17, about 45 minutes after you began the interview and then left, correct?
Yes.
6:21, you called her back and you spoke for 3 minutes and 58 seconds. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you discuss the interview?
I don't recall the content of that conversation.
And of course, you never memorialized that in any report, did you?
He doesn't recall the conversation. So if this is a conversation about the case, there should be a report on it. If it's not about the case, well, then it's personal, isn't it?
You had a subsequent phone call with Julie Albert on your personal cell phone.
I did not.
Trooper Proctor, after your interview with Julie Albert, your sister, Courtney, texted you, "How did it go at Julie's? She was so nervous." You recall that?
Yes.
In fact, you responded to that with a ha, 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 ha. 4 ha's, right? And then why, question mark, correct?
Correct.
Then you responded, "It was fine, just a quick convo," correct?
Yes.
You were literally reporting back to your sister about the progress of your investigation in a homicide investigation, weren't you?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently.
Were you reporting your progress to your sister about your investigation?
Objection.
Sustained.
Were you reporting your progress of your investigation back to your sister, Courtney Proctor?
No, absolutely not.
But you did say that the conversation of the
Absolutely not. And combine that with the fact that he has the text messages.
formal interview went fine. It was just a quick convo, correct?
In response to my sister indicating Julie was nervous, that's why I told her it was fine.
Trooper Proctor, Julie and Chris Albert were not actually treated like witnesses in a murder investigation. They were treated more like friends. Wouldn't you agree?
Objection.
Is that true?
Absolutely not.
We've established that you're very close with your sister, Courtney, correct?
Correct.
You provided your sister with updates on important advancements during the course of your investigation into this case. Did you not periodically?
I made her aware of newsworthy stuff.
That started as early as January 29th, 2022. Isn't that right?
Don't have the exact date or content.
Well, the day of the incident, you began letting her know that you were involved, that you had been assigned, what the status was,
Yes.
the nature of the case, the fact
Correct.
that it was a homicide, correct?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you discussed who the players were, who the people were that were involved. Isn't that right?
I just mentioned Julie and Chris were out earlier in the evening.
So you mentioned the Alberts, correct?
Julie and Chris, yes.
You also mentioned the McCabe's too, didn't you? At some point.
Yes.
Yeah. At 2668, Your Honor, that's the page that I'm referring to. Okay. You don't need to show this at this point. You write homicide, correct?
He just testified to this. And now he suddenly can't remember. He has to go look it up.
You wrote the word homicide. Is that right?
Yes.
You were describing to your sister the nature of the case that you are now assigned. Is that right?
Correct.
She wrote, "The Canton thing is a homicide." And you wrote, "Don't say a word to anyone." Correct?
Correct.
And then she wrote, "Of course not." Isn't that right?
Yes.
And then you wrote what?
In the very least, it's suspicious.
In the very least, it's suspicious. Correct?
Correct.
So at that time, at least at the time that you wrote that text on the 29th at 3:05 in the afternoon, you believed that the case was suspicious, right?
It was before we found significant pieces of evidence.
So you believe that it was suspicious that it may involve the Alberts, right?
Absolutely not.
She then writes, "This is your livelihood," didn't she?
She did.
Meaning this kind of case could make or it could break your career, right?
Objection.
She then wrote, "I would never mess with that." Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think what Jackson was saying is how it was meant, because it's followed with the "I would never mess with that," because he said to her, "Look, don't say a word to anyone," and she is letting him know she understands. Hey, I get this is your livelihood. I'm not going to put that at risk. I'm not going to hurt you that way. So that's how I took it.
Mr. Trooper Proctor was warning you that you shouldn't be investigating a case in which close friends or family members were involved.
Objection.
Did you take her text, "This is your livelihood, I would never mess with that," as a warning from her that you shouldn't be investigating a case that involved close friends?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Absolutely not. That was in response to "don't say a word to anyone." And that was how I interpreted "this is your livelihood, I would never mess with that."
A couple of minutes later, 3:07 on January 29th, you told your sister, quote, "Julie and Chris were at the bar with the victim and girlfriend. Got to interview them." Is that right?
Yes.
So you were telling Courtney, your sister, updates on what your investigation advancements were, correct?
Just
You're gonna
that part.
interview, why you're going to interview them.
Yes.
She wrote, "You got to be kidding me," correct?
Correct.
Did you take that as, "You got to be kidding me, the Alberts are involved"?
No, absolutely not.
And then you wrote, "It's not a big deal," correct?
Correct.
And then she wrote, "I bet I know the person. Sounds like it is," meaning it is a big deal, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what she meant with those messages there.
But she did write, "I bet I know the person," didn't she?
She did write that, yes.
And you know she's very close with the Alberts, correct?
And she's close with Julie and Chris.
You then wrote, "No, I meant," or you wrote "not." I think you meant "no." "I meant that they were at the bar with him," correct?
Yes.
She writes, "Yeah, I got that part." And then she continues on, "But I know a lot of their friends," correct?
Yes.
Did you see a problem in this exchange?
Nothing jumped out at me.
Your sister's literally explaining that your family
He's got his head up his own butt so far that he's putting his ignorance and his bias and his need to defend himself on display for everyone to see. And one of the things about bias is that very often the person who has the most bias does not see it at all, will insist that they're not biased. It's like when somebody says, "I'm the least racist person you'll ever meet." I mean, right away, it's red flag, right? "I'm the least judgmental person you'll ever meet." Red flag.
friends are suspects or possible suspects in a murder investigation that you're in charge of, correct?
Objection.
On January 30th, 2022 at 9:13 in the morning, your sister texted you again, quote, "Jesus Christ, the party was at one of the Alberts," correct?
Yes.
And you two were discussing the fact that, to put it in her words, "Jesus Christ, these are our friends," right?
Objection.
How did you take her "Jesus Christ, the party was at one of the Alberts" with 2 exclamation points? How did you take that?
That's the way I'm interpreting my sister's text messages was that surprised and shocked that this is where Mr. O'Keefe was found on the front lawn of that residence.
Why would you be surprised and shocked that it's that residence as opposed to another one, right? Is she surprised and shocked every time something else happens around where people are involved? Probably not, because she doesn't know them. She's surprised and shocked because she knows these people.
Could it be, "Jesus Christ, we know these people"?
Again, that's how I read that message.
You don't deny, Trooper Proctor, that you were routinely disclosing to your sister pretty intimate details about the investigation, correct?
I wouldn't say intimate. I'd say newsworthy stuff or just generic, nothing
Well,
too specific.
newsworthy, would you have gone to the news at this point in the investigation? Would you have gone to the news and said, Julie and Chris were at the bar, I got to go interview them?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Is that what you do, Trooper?
No, I would not do that, sir.
So it's not newsworthy. These were details, internal details about the investigation, weren't they?
Yes,
And you were sharing them with your sister, Courtney Proctor, correct?
correct.
And Courtney Proctor's best friend is Jillian Daniels, and one of her closest friends is Julie Albert, right?
Correct.
Then on February 1st, 2022, your sister texts you that she's actually meeting with Julie Albert, didn't she?
Yes,
And that was before you ever interviewed Julie, correct?
yes,
So it appears that Courtney was providing information to Julie of some sort before you were able to actually interview her. Is that right?
Objection.
Sustained.
She was, well, let me ask it this way. You don't deny that Courtney was meeting with Julie before you interviewed her, correct?
correct.
And you don't deny that you had been providing information about the case with Courtney before you interviewed Julie, correct?
Provided information that Julie and Chris were at the waterfall and I needed to interview them. Yes, that's the information I shared.
And who knows what you shared verbally, not in text messages, correct?
Objection.
Did you, we have text messages, Trooper Proctor. Did you share other information on phone calls with Courtney?
No,
So the only information we're to believe, you talk to her 5 to 6 times a day. The only information that you claim you shared with Courtney about the details of the investigation are contained in these texts, which we have.
Objection.
I'll let you answer that. Can you answer that?
the information that I share with my sister contained within these texts, yes.
You never discussed this case verbally, over the phone or in person with Courtney.
On the phone, I'm sure there's been conversations that things that have been newsworthy items that have gone to the news. There's definitely been conversations in that regard.
What do you want to bet he's running through his head and trying to calculate and figure out whether or not anybody has a phone tap or anybody overheard? To see these texts from an investigator's personal cell phone, this is very unusual. I'm sure that this guy thought that never in a million years would these things be obtained and made public like this. So now that that's happened, I gotta wonder how much in his head there he's scrambling, thinking, okay, plausible deniability. What can I get caught on? He has to just sort of recalibrate everything.
Then before you ever interviewed Julie, your sister informed you that Julie actually wanted to get you a gift for your participation on this case, correct?
Yes.
In tab 5, let's turn to page 2672, Trooper Proctor. You see the text from you, what's up?
Yes.
And what's Courtney Proctor's response?
Nothing. I just saw Julie, and she said, when this is all over, she wants to get you a thank you gift. And I respond with, get Elizabeth one.
Hang on just a second. Let's take them one at a time. You were asked about this on direct examination by Mr. Lowley, right?
Correct.
And you looked at the jurors, paused, and said, I never asked for a gift. I never received a gift. Elizabeth never asked for a gift. She never received a gift. You remember that?
Correct.
You said you never asked for a gift, correct?
Correct.
What's your next text?
Get Elizabeth one.
I guess this is Trooper Proctor's version of integrity.
Elizabeth won what?
Referring to a gift.
Right. So you did, in fact, ask for a gift, didn't you?
For my wife, who had been home with my children for the last 10 nights.
From Julie Albert
Yes.
for your participation on this case.
I don't know if that's yes.
Well, Courtney Proctor answers that question by saying, because I guess her and Chris were friends and John, and she's so proud of you for leading this investigation, correct?
Correct.
You're aware During the course of your investigation, well, let me ask it this way. Let me ask a foundational question. Do you pull phone records as a matter of course in investigations of this nature?
Yes.
Did you pull phone records in this case, variously?
The phone records of,
Of anybody? Witnesses, suspects,
not witnesses, Mr.
individual people, whatever?
We didn't pull full phone records of witnesses.
Victim?
Victim and Miss Reed.
During the course of your investigation, did you become aware that there were 67 calls between Julie Albert and your sister, Courtney, in the months following John O'Keefe's death?
Objection.
Did you become aware during the course of your investigation of the level of communication between Julie Albert, one of the witnesses on the case, and your sister?
Objection.
I'm sustaining that objection. You can come try and convince me otherwise if you want, Mr. Jackson.
I can ask it a different way, Your Honor. Thank you. Did you ever seek information about phone calls and communications that Julie Albert may or may not have been having with anybody else?
No.
Didn't download her phone, didn't seek her phone records?
No.
Did Courtney ever tell you that she had consistent communications with Julie Albert? Or did you know that otherwise?
Objection.
During the months, let me ask it this way, during the months following John O'Keefe's death, you did continue to have consistent communications with Courtney, though, didn't you?
Yes, I speak to my sister every day.
Trooper Proctor, were you using Courtney, your sister, as an intermediary between you and Julie Albert?
Absolutely not.
You were well aware from the very beginning of your investigation that Colin Albert was, in fact, at 34 Fairview on the night in question, right?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you testified at the grand jury, the state court grand jury on this case, that you knew that Colin Albert was at the location, right?
Yes.
Did you make any concerted efforts to keep Colin Albert's name out of this investigation?
No.
Why is it, Trooper Proctor, that Colin Albert's name fails to appear in a single police report until July 18, 2023?
Colin Albert was not at the home. He left at approximately 12:10 a.m. before anyone from the waterfall had arrived back there.
Let's look at, obviously, part of the job of an investigator is to be as complete and thorough as possible, correct?
Yes.
You don't just take someone's word for something. You look for corroborating evidence, don't you?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you wouldn't take a witness's word for almost anything in a reasonable investigation, would you?
Objection.
Would you? You can have that.
If I find the witness to be credible and have no reason to lie, then yes, I would take their word.
Would you try to support a witness's statement, or witnesses with an apostrophe, S apostrophe, their statements with corroborating evidence?
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially, even if you find a witness to be credible, if you think that they have no reason to lie, that they're an honest person, generally speaking, that doesn't mean that their statement is accurate. You can be inaccurate and not be lying. You can simply be mistaken. So even with witnesses who you believe, you do try to get some sort of corroborating evidence.
Corroborating evidence might be talking to other witnesses, right?
Yes.
It might be looking at cell phone data, correct?
Correct.
It might be looking at geolocation data, correct?
Yes.
You're trying to find out where someone is. You might pull information from their phone concerning geolocation data, right?
Yes.
You might pull cell tower information, right?
If there's a need for it.
There's myriad ways that you can find out whether someone's telling the truth about where they were and when they were there, right?
Right.
Let's take a look at your handwritten notes from your interview with Juliana Nagel on October 5th, 2022. Let me ask a foundational question, Trooper Proctor. Do you remember exactly what's in your notes from a conversation that you had on October 5th, 2022?
I don't know.
Do you think it would refresh your recollection to take a look at your handwritten notes?
Yes, sir.
Are those your notes, your handwritten notes from this, at least partially from this investigation?
Yes.
Does that reflect your handwritten notes based on a conversation that you had with Juliana Nagel on or about October 5th, 2022? Does this appear to be an accurate representation or an accurate copy of your notes from your interview with Juliana Nagel?
Yes.
Your Honor, With the court's permission, I changed my mind. I would like to have this marked as next.
Introduced into evidence?
Correct.
Is there an objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the objection sustained.
Is it true that in your handwritten notes, you list the following individuals based on Julian?
That's interesting to me because usually notes of an investigating officer are admissible. And because when they're making the objections, they're not doing speaking objections, I'm not sure why that's not being allowed.
Juliana Nagel's conversation with you as being at 34 Fairview. Brian, Juliana, Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, Courtney Alba, Colin Albert, and Sarah Levinson. Correct?
Correct.
You then drafted a report memorializing your conversation with Juliana Nagel, correct?
Yes.
And that report is a formal memorialization of your interview based on your investigation, correct?
Yes, a summary of the conversation for the interview.
And that report is the thing that's turned over to the Commonwealth, correct?
Yes.
And the report is the thing that's entered into discovery and provided to the defense.
Correct.
And isn't it true that in that report, you list the individuals that were at 34 Fairview as Brian, Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, Sarah Levinson? Is that correct?
Yes.
What's the one name that was left out of your report on that list?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Was there one name left out? Break that down, Mr. Jackson.
Sure. Isn't it true that in your report, you excluded the one name, Colin Albert, from the list of individuals that were in your notes?
Yes, because he arrived later in the evening. The other females were there from the start.
Then that's what you put in your report.
At the time that you wrote your report, the formal report, this one, you did not believe that your handwritten notes were also going to be disclosed, did you?
No, I knew that was a possibility.
When you finally did get around to interviewing Colin Albert, you personally conducted that interview, did you not?
Yes.
Colin
Along
Albert
with Trooper
told
Zach
you-
Clark.
One at a time.
I'm sorry.
Finish your answer, Trooper.
Please go ahead.
Yes, along with Trooper Zach Clark in my office.
Colin Albert told you that he was picked up by Allie McCabe from his uncle's house at 12:10 a.m., correct?
Correct.
Allie McCabe also told you that she picked up Colin Albert at 34 Fairview at 12:10 a.m. and then dropped him off at his house, correct?
Correct.
And then she indicated that she went straight home after that, right?
Yes.
Did you conduct any further investigation to determine whether Colin Albert and Allie McCabe were actually telling the truth about that time?
We did not.
You just took them at their word, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you realize you had a forensic image at the time. You had a forensic image of Jennifer McCabe's cell phone in your possession, right?
Correct.
You're also aware that she has a Life 360 app on her phone that tracks the location of Allie McCabe, correct?
I was not aware the app tracked her daughter. I knew of the Life 360 app, but I wasn't aware of the capability of her tracking her daughter.
Did you bother to look at Jennifer McCabe's Life 360 app to determine whether Colin Albert and Allie McCabe were telling the truth about the time that they supposedly left 34 Fairview?
Objection.
Did you do that on allow it?
I did not.
Can we take a look at
Getting your timeline straight and figuring out where everybody was or wasn't is a fundamental thing that you've got to do. And here we're talking about Julie Nagel and a report finally being written in October. So the witnesses aren't interviewed. The evidence, supposed evidence, isn't turned into the lab. Nobody's statement is corroborated. Months and months and months later, things are purposely being omitted, information being handed out like candy. But it's all fine because on January 29th, before he conducted an investigation, he knew Karen Reed was guilty and she was effed. And that's his thorough investigation.
tab 8? Do you recall looking at all at a Life 360 app or its data from Celebrate Report?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you or did you not look at any data from Life 360 from Jennifer McCabe's phone?
Objection.
For the remainder of Proctor's testimony, I'm going to mix up the format a little bit. It'll be part reaction and part summary and commentary. I'll stop this video here because it's too long. Thank you for listening. Trust your gut. I'll see you in the comments.